Joe Potenza, soon to be the next Alex Hormozi. Welcome into Forever Forward, my friend.
I appreciate you having me on. I feel like this has been a long time coming.
Absolutely has. And it's funny how when you take certain leaps of faith, me with this podcast, certain people gravitate back around towards you that have taken similar leaps of faith. You're farther along than I am in mine, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. But I guess just to start, can you give us an overview of what you got going on from a business standpoint?
So I run two businesses. I have a real estate wholesale company, which is essentially finding off-market distressed deals. And that is how I make my active income. I then take my profits from that business and I buy everything from single family homes to small to mid-sized apartment buildings.
If you're comfortable, could you just give us a sense of when you say scale, what do some of the high level numbers look like on this?
Yeah. It's funny. It's still hard for me to talk about this stuff. We were talking about this off the pod. I'm still not used to sharing all of this. I've been very reserved, over the last few years, even with friends and family, just about the size of the business, the amount of money I was making. So I'm still getting used to this, but we do, anywhere from 400 to 500 grand in revenue a month.
And you have been very quiet about this because you've been at this for some time, but only recently have you started posting content, coming on shows like this.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is, yes, about the business, but also about the last 6 years and the person you've become. Because I feel like as I try to learn how to build this podcast, the person you become is just as important, if not more important, than the business that you built.
Yeah, your earnings is a direct reflection of your own personal development, right? If someone isn't earning what they want to be, they're simply not providing enough value to the marketplace, which correlates with their own personal development. The reason someone who usually in the entrepreneurial space, people say they changed, they changed. Like you have to change to be able to make a lot of money, right? The same mindsets, the same mental frames you once had just do not work if you're trying to go big in anything, whether you're trying to be a killer podcaster, whether you're trying to build a multi-7-figure business, whether you're trying to, whatever that may be, you have to shift your mental frames, which kind of like you mentioned in the beginning, how we have reconnected. What you see in any kind of space that is trying to achieve any sort of greatness, right? Like just doing anything more than the average. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Those kind of minds end up connecting because people who are driven and who are passionate about anything, you could be fucking passionate about gardening.
Yeah.
Right? If someone's really excited about it and they're really good at it, I would love to speak with them. Right? It's not like I only have friends who make millions of dollars. I just like anyone who is really driven, kind of like my brother, closest person in my life. Me and him are on vastly different paths. He's a football coach, yet we share all the same mindset. We're obsessed with what we do, right? And so then we're able to connect and that passion comes through. And that's why me and you reconnected because you're like, dude, I want to try this. And I remember we talked in the sauna at Aubrey's wedding.
Yeah.
And as you start excelling, you want to just be around people who are passionate about anything. Be a really good friend. Be a really good family member, right? I would still enjoy being in your company if you are good at anything, right? But you have to be trying to get better at something.
I appreciate you saying all of that. And candidly, Joe, really, it's been humbling to have seen the amount of success that you've seen financially, but you still treat every day of my own journey, sort of as a pseudo mentor of mine, like you're fired up for me. You want to see me succeed, genuinely want to see me succeed, because I feel like what brings you the most joy is seeing others with that same fire that you have. You made an interesting comment earlier about how your earnings are a direct reflection of your personal development. I know you weren't always the person you were today, and for a little while you weren't earning anything. Yeah. So can we go back? Because this is a really interesting story that I'd like you to tell. Where were you 5-6 years ago today? And why did you decide to go into real estate?
I will tell that story, but I want to say something about what you just said. A part of the reason why I support you in your journey, there's two reasons. One, people only root for those who do not need it. Sure, now I own all this real estate. I got this business. I make, a lot of money for someone our age. I have more support than I could ever have now. In the beginning, oh, that little business isn't going to work. It's too risky. Oh, maybe you shouldn't go buy that piece of real estate. And the same shit is happening to you. Oh, your podcast is cringy.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe stick with your job. And so I want to support you because I understand what that beginning time period feels like when no one supports you, and that's when you need it the most.
Well, first of all, you're exactly right. And you are probably one of the few people that are qualified to say it because the beginning is lonely.
The beginning, your friends and family don't believe in you. You have no money. You have no skills. All you have is time. And so in the beginning, you have to pay down your ignorance debt, right? You have to pay down your knowledge debt by simply just putting in an ungodly amount of hours. It is incredibly lonely. You have absolutely zero reassurance any of this work is going to be worth anything, right? And that's what creates fear inside of people. It's the unknown of if this is going to work.
And what if this all is for naught?
Exactly. Like,
because that's what I'm living with right now.
If it was guaranteed, no one would fear it, but everyone would do it, which would in turn make it impossible, right? And so the fact that it is unknown and that it is very hard is what makes it attractive and what allows there to be such financial reward at the end of it. And so there's an inverse correlation between difficulty and earning. The harder something is, the more you earn. If something's really easy, society as a whole does not respect that thing, right? And so something that is inherently hard, society then respects. In turn, you make a boatload of money doing it. And so what people don't realize as you go into the entrepreneurial field, whether that be starting a podcast, starting a business, is you are essentially taking on the unknown for everyone you then will hire. What I'm learning as my business is scaling is what my role now has become, and we could talk a lot more in depth about this, and I will come back to your previous question, is I'm fully out of the operations now. Like whether I show up to work or not, I will essentially print money, right? Do I want it to be more money? Heck yes. Is it a lot of money for a lot of people? Yes, it's a ton of money. And so I am now trying to figure out what my role is. And one of the big roles of, a leader of a business as it's scaling is to simply shield that uncertainty and fear that exists within being an entrepreneur so the team doesn't feel it. If the team feels it, you're fucked, right? If everyone is worried about all of your problems, the business will just cease to operate. I think that comes back to that early stage of why you have to learn to do that is you have to learn to sit in the incredibly uncomfortable and the incredibly painful periods. And the reason you evolve is because you do go through that lonely path.
Well, and the only way to learn it is to go through it. And to your point, you cannot read it in a book. You cannot be taught it in a course. You need to suffer through it.
I'm a huge believer in schooling, and society has ruined the way we consume knowledge. And even with social media, people will become obsessed with consuming knowledge, yet they never change their behavior. Evolving in any way, being a good friend, being a good partner, being a good entrepreneur, being a good podcast host is a simple cycle. And the cycle is you acquire new information and then you adjust your current behavior. You then have a decision tree. Did change behavior get result I wanted? If no, get new information. Start loop again, right? If you did achieve even a portion of your desired outcome, you then keep that changed behavior. And so I think people don't think of learning that way. And that's why people stay stuck for so long. But again, bringing you back to why that's important for the beginning of the journey is you have to evolve so quickly because you're literally trying to survive. You're trying to make enough money.
Well said. And I appreciate the circle back because I'm living in that right now where so much is changing and so much is evolving that it's very uncomfortable. I'm somebody that's and I think a lot of people listening are people that are very averse to change. But in the beginning of any journey like this, you are going to transform, right? Mm-hmm. And you may seem similar to others. You may seem very different, but internally things are going to change. And I made an analogy on a prior podcast about, look, the Lord of the Rings is one of my favorite movies ever. And in the beginning of the movie, when Frodo goes out on his big quest, he's just like this little guy that goes and saves the world. And then at the end of the movie, the hobbits ask if he'd like to return to the Shire. And he says, I don't think I ever can. I don't think I can. And it sounds corny, but I think it's true. As badly as you want to sometimes go back to the person you were, it's just not possible. And it's because of this rapid change. And it happens very, very fast.
I get why you say it's corny. I don't feel it's corny. When people say, oh, you've changed, I simply say, oh, you haven't?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Of course I'm different than the person I was in high school. Right. I hope so. That was a decade ago. Like, imagine being like, I haven't changed in 5 years, a decade. Right. Like, that is fucking corny. And I'm not trying to offend anyone, but like, if you're someone who condemns other people, especially when they're going after it, if anyone listening to this has ever said Mike's podcast is cringe, fuck you. Like, I can guarantee you'll never be successful, right? Because that is the biggest limiting factor in a lot of people's belief is they constantly criticize, oh, it won't work. Oh, that's a scam. Mike's podcast won't work. Oh, Joe's business is too risky. Yet then you see me 5 years later, right? And you're like, oh, Joe got lucky. No, I just didn't think it was a fucking scam and I just worked hard at something.
And
right?
what do you think that's a reflection of? Because I'm going to be honest, right? And this is on here, but let's address it now. I learned about your business 4 years ago. And when you first told me, I didn't, again, you were very humble. You didn't mention numbers, but I didn't believe that you were doing all that you said you were doing. In hindsight, I recognize that the reason I thought that was because I said to myself, if I can't do it, then Joe can't do it because I'm not doing it. So therefore, nobody else is allowed to do it. Why do you think people project that onto others?
The reason they project it onto others they know is because they realize, oh, that could have been me. Because
Exactly.
we come from the same background. We come from the same circumstances. It's really easy to see someone else, young, multimillionaire, and be like, oh, he or she has something I did not. When you grow up with someone and then you see them evolving and then they start to have success with it, you instantly feel a level of insecurity because you're like, oh, maybe I'm not doing enough.
That was exactly how I
Maybe
felt.
I'm not trying hard enough. I think naturally, most people will feel that way. And I think as you grow, you shift your brain to realize that money, success is unlimitedly abundant. And my success does not prevent you from being successful. If anything, if you shift your framework, I can help you. And the same way I look at you and say, I'm going to pour a ton of energy into Mike because I don't know where that may happen in the future, but I know by both of us crushing it, there'll be future opportunity. And so I think people believe it's like a zero-sum game. If Joe's doing this, that then hurts my chances of being able to be successful, right? Like he has the market share, whatever that may be.
The pie is only so big and he's got so much. So I hate him.
Grows.
Right.
Every year. The pie is unlimited. The fucking government infinitely prints money, right? Like there is an ungodly amount of money out there to go and grab. It's just when you don't try and go and grab it. And so I have a big belief, and I can be fairly intense with some of my views, and this may piss some people off. The only people I think that are losers in life, and I mean this, and it sounds harsh, are those that criticize and never try. And this doesn't have to be just with entrepreneurship.
Right.
Like there are people who go through their entire life and they are a bad friend, a bad family member. They barely try at their job. They're not skilled in anything. If you're going to do anything, if you're going to go work a job, you got to be there anyways. Why not be an absolute savage at that job? If you're going to be friends, like here's the thing, I don't have many friends, but you kind of felt it, right? When we reconnected, I was like, dude, we're boys again. I pour so much energy into it because that's the person I want to be. I'd rather have 3 friends and be the best friend humanly possible to those people than to waste energy doing anything. And that goes for the gym, that goes for my business. If you're going to do it, go really hard at it.
You get more out of life that way, right? You get more from people. You get more from your endeavors. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm going 1,000,000% in everything I'm doing. But since speaking to you, and especially since starting this show, I've realized, like, why try to do anything half-ass? Why not try your hardest? Let me try and get you back on track a little, back to the start of the story. Yeah. And the reason I want to pull you back here is because I think it's really compelling, right? Mm-hmm. We hear a lot about people that have found success. We see them on Instagram, right? I think it's the Pareto principle. 80% of what we see are the 20% of people that found success, but we don't really hear a lot about the others. And at one point, you were somebody that was in that bottom percentage. You ultimately went through hard times and now you're successful. Yeah. What was the beginning of all this like for you?
It sounds cliche, but I'd always been fairly entrepreneurial, even from like a young kid. And I think there are certain people who are born with proclivities that push them in certain directions, right? Like the reason you might have felt a proclivity for your podcast is you're naturally really charismatic and an amazing speaker.
Thank you.
Right? And so you have natural proclivities. I, from a young age, was always super interested in how things worked, right? I had 2 amazing parents. They did a fantastic job, raising me and my siblings, I think. But a part of that is like, it sounds cliche. I was obsessed with lemonade stands, right? From a young age. But my parents went further and said, hey, this stuff costs money, right? And so I'd always ask my parents like what things cost. And I don't know why, I was just like fascinated with it. And then, certain things happen growing up and you have certain aspects of your life that develop you into who you are. And so my journey into entrepreneurship, I had tried a business in high school, a car detailing business, didn't go anywhere. I was pretty lazy with it. I didn't love the idea of actually doing all the manual labor. I think I detailed like 4 or 5 cars. And so then got into, trading because I was like, I'm going to be a day trader. I'm going to get super rich. So
I remember that.
Yeah. I literally in high school was obsessed with day trading and I was actually decent at it. And when I say day trading, what I would actually do was swing trades. My trades were, 1 to 3 months long, but it ended up doing well. And so by the time I was like a freshman in college, I had turned like $6,000 into like 30, 35 grand. So then in college, I was like, I watched The Social Network. I was like, I'm going to be fucking Mark Zuckerberg.
And that's the movie about the creation of Facebook, man.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, I'm going to be a billionaire before I graduate college. And so I took all my money and I paid some developers and I built an app and it failed miserably. I think we got like 2,000 downloads.
What was that? What was the app about?
It was an app called Herd and it was essentially an anonymous Snap Maps before Snap Maps came out. And the whole goal was, as you know, me and my brother, we used to love to, party in high school. And we used to get frustrated if we went into the city to try and use our fake IDs to get into bars. And I remember one time we got into a bar and it was all old people. And I was like, dude, I just wish we knew the average age of a bar. And so the idea was just an anonymous geo-tracking of
who's where.
Yeah, who's where. What's the average age and what's the demographic makeup of the bar? I was just trying to get girls. I was like, where are the chicks my age? And so that was the app. And so it failed, but with every one of these things, you learn a shit ton, right? And so that was kind of the impetus of my thought process of, hey, I am not this genius developer. I have certain skills. I'm never going to build this super innovative tech company. And so kind of junior year of college, I was like, all right, I'm not going to be able to build something like this. At that time, I just wanted to be rich. Like that's all I cared about was making a lot of money. And so my buddy, who's one of my closest friends, was like, hey, my brother's in investment banking. He's making an absolute killing, in which he does. Like he's multimillionaire in his 20s through the Wall Street route. I mean, dude's way smarter than me, like went to Wharton, whatever. His brother, my best friend, one of my best friends was like, yo, you should go work on Wall Street. Like you're kind of good with numbers. Ended up doing a bunch of interviews and shit. Ended up getting an internship for my junior year summer between senior year. Hated it, but they offered me like a killer salary and everything before I even went back my senior year. Took that. The second I accepted it, they had there was a signing bonus, all this kind of stuff. And I was so engaged by the money, but before even going, I knew I was going to hate it. I did the internship. I just didn't fit in there. And so my senior year, I had a lot of free time because I'd finished a lot of my
your
courses.
Coursework. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, dude, I'm going to party all semester. This is going to be amazing. But then I realized all my friends had normal workload. And so I was bored. And so I really got into reading and personal development, which me and reading had an interesting dynamic for a while, which we can go down that rabbit hole later.
Well, because it might tease it, but when you were younger, what did you struggle with?
Yeah. So I'm dyslexic, whatever. I had a bunch of learning disabilities.
Right.
I couldn't read till the 7th grade. So me and reading had a very interesting journey. But then I was super bored. So I got into reading and I read a statistic that 88% of all millionaires were created in real estate. This was senior year of college. The minute I read that statistic, like before the period, I even crossed my eyes over the period, I was like, I'm in real estate. I knew nothing about real estate. I had no skills, couldn't do construction, zero knowledge about real estate, but I'm like, I'm going to be in real estate.
Well, this is why I'm so fascinated, because this is where a lot of the story starts.
Yeah.
Right here.
And so I started reading every book on house flipping. And I saw a YouTube video about like a house flipper. And I was like, dude, I'm going to be a fucking house flipper. I'll have a Lamborghini in 6 months.
100%.
So started making offers on houses my senior year of college. I had no money, right? Remember, I already lost my only 35 grand I lost. I had lost my work study job, which was like part of my financial aid package. So I literally had no money at this time. But I was like, I'm going to be a house flipper. So I started making all these offers. Graduate, go back to Fairfield, Connecticut. And was literally, I think it was almost exactly a month before I started my job on Wall Street in New York. And I was like, I need to find a house to flip before my job starts. And so when everyone else was relaxing, I was literally making offers on 40, 50 houses a week. Anything I get my hands on, I was lowballing the shit out of people.
Interesting. With what money?
No.
How do you even do that? You were going to go finance the whole offer?
I had found a hard money lender.
Okay. Wow. You were going to get loan sharked.
Yeah, who wasn't going to loan to me, but he gave me a pre-approval letter for $500. Technically,
kind of shady. Yep.
Yeah. And so he's like, dude, pay me $500. I'll give you a pre-approval letter for $250,000. I was like, done.
Yeah, easy.
$500, like my last $500.
Wow.
And so I'm making all these offers. Right when I started my job, I had an offer accepted on a house. And I remember I was driving the car. The realtor called me. They're like, they took your offer. I was like, what?
You're like, oh shit.
And like, I got excited, but a pit sank in my stomach. I was like, I have no money. How the fuck am I going to buy this house in 30 days? Meanwhile, I'm like literally driving into New York to move into my New York apartment to start a job where I'm going to work like
80 hours a week.
And so I started that job, and at night and on the weekends, I started calling every single friend, family member, aunt, uncle, person I had spoken to once, and I could get their phone number, and started pitching them on why they should lend me $200,000 of why they should lend me $200,000. And I had 30 days to close on this house, and I was working this job on Wall Street. And so I remember the exact number. I pitched 51 people. Friends, family, anyone I knew had money with. And I was just trying to raise 5, 10 grand at a time. I was like, every single friend, family member said the same thing. Joe, we love you. You're hungry, but what the fuck do you know about real estate? And my answer was nothing. And so I was getting super discouraged, but I just kept pitching people. The 51st person I pitched, extremely wealthy dude who I had never spoken to really before. Like I'd spoken to him a little bit, but I wasn't as close with him. He was the founder of the company my dad worked at. So I pitched him, and I remember he asked me very unique questions that I hadn't been asked by anyone else I had pitched. And I remember he said to me, he said, so Joe, let me get this straight. Your plan is you have a house under contract that you don't have money for. You just started a new job. And again, as you know, with finance jobs, this is not like I was about to be working 40 hours a week.
No, it's your whole life, man.
Yeah. And so I was 2 weeks into the job, and he goes, so your plan, so you just moved into New York City with 3 of your college friends. You're making good money at your job, and you're going to train back an hour. Because I told him, hey, the house is an hour away. I'm going to get on the train. The second I can get out of work on Fridays, I'm going to stay at my mom's. I'll work remote, whatever I have to do. And I'll be at the house all weekend working on the house. And the plan was me and RJ Beebe, shout out RJ, one of my best friends, we're going to do this house together. And so my job was to put together the money. His job was going to be the construction. I don't know if he knew I didn't have any of this shit lined up yet, which obviously he knows that now. And so he asked me, and he's like, you're going to train back an hour every single weekend, but you're making good money right now. And I remember as he said it, I got like a pit in my stomach, because I realized, I was like, this is an awful idea.
You're like, when you put it that way, I'm kind of an idiot.
Yeah, I was like, when you put it that way, I wouldn't lend the money. And I remember I just kind of paused, and I was pausing because I was nervous. And he then goes, you know what? I love it. Sounds nuts. I remember he said that exactly. And he kind of had like a nerdier voice. And so it was funny the way he said, he's like, I love it. It sounds nuts. And I was like, really? And he asked me a few more questions, and he eventually goes, I'll do it.
So he gave you the full thing?
Full thing, no contract. So basically handshake agreement. I was going to pay him the same amount. And so I basically raised the money. And so I closed on this house 30 days after I went under contract. I had never bought a piece of real estate in my life before. And me and my buddy were going to renovate this house. And that was the start of my real estate
career.
Yeah, that was the start of the real estate career. And, then one thing led to another. The whole time I worked a job, I hated it. I did not fit in. I was butting heads with everyone. I was a horrible employee.
Yep.
Horrible, partially because, I was trying to do all this other stuff. Also, I was dyslexic, and half my job was writing these like memos of like investment companies. I'm like, dude, I can't even spell. Like, I was a total personality hire.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like they were like, dude, we got totally duped by this kid.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Like this guy's cool, but
And by the way, they did.
totally. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't do shit. I remember they come over to our desk, and they would like stand behind me as I'd type. Every word would be red squiggly line, right? Because I couldn't spell anything right. I was like, oh my God, I'm awful at this job.
Yeah.
So I'm working this job on Wall Street, doing a bad job. Like just truly, I was not doing a good job at it. And I was trying to buy another house to flip. I had decided I didn't want to do real estate in Connecticut anymore. And so I started looking at markets where I got turned on to St. Pete, which is where we are now. At the same time as I was doing this, I had learned of my investing strategy, which is real estate wholesaling. I remember I was sitting there, and a realtor in the area who also bought a lot of real estate, who I'm still friends with today, really nice guy, really successful guy, was like, yeah, I just bought this deal from a wholesaler, and he made 30 grand. I remember I was like, what do you mean he made 30? What did he do? He's like, oh, he just assigned the contract to me. I was like, I just fucking worked 6 months every weekend when my friends are partying in New York. I was training back, and me and RJ had to split 30 grand. And here's just so you give perspective of what my weekend looked like. I had zero construction skills. RJ, my buddy, amazingly talented construction guy. My one job with old houses in bathrooms, the way they used to lay tile is they used to pour, 4 or 5 inches of concrete to like set the tubs and the tile. And there was 2 bathrooms fully tiled. My one job for 6 months with a little jackhammer was fucking drilling away all of this concrete.
That's what you were doing every waking moment of your weekend.
After working 60, 70 hours a week at this finance job.
Go home, jackhammer for 2 days.
I was just jackhammering the shit. And then I found out this wholesaler made 30 grand, the same amount of money I made. And I was like, that's it. I'm a wholesaler. And so I started learning everything I could about the business. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I really didn't do any deals while I still had the job because I didn't have enough time. But I was trying to learn. I'd actually hired a virtual assistant in the Philippines, paying her out of my salary from my job to try and get this off the ground. But where I really started seeing success with the entrepreneurship side of it, which is kind of a crazy story. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a house in St. Pete, and I'm going to renovate it, and I'm going to keep it as a rental property. I buy this absolute tear down shit box, wood frame house, 1,500 square feet. It was a duplex in a great neighborhood in St. Pete, but you couldn't even see the house from the street. That's how wooded this house was in like a city-esque neighborhood like this. And so I bought this house. Again, I have a knack for putting myself in situations that I am highly unqualified for, incredibly unqualified for. This one I didn't have a partner on. And so I start renovating this house, And the renovation I thought was going to be like 100 grand, ended up being like 220. And so I ran out of money while working my job. So I had this house. Because I didn't have enough money, I didn't pull permits, which is very illegal. I was having these contractors work on the weekends so they wouldn't get caught by the city. I'm an idiot. Of course I get caught. There's a house half framed without permits. And so I get red tagged, which is essentially the city saying, hey, you're doing this work without permits. Until you correct the work and file for your permit, you're going to get fined $150 a day. This all happened in 1 week. The next day, my contractor quit because I owed him 20 grand and I just didn't have the money to pay him. The house is half framed. There's no permits and I'm getting fined $150 a day and I'm out of money. That Thursday, I got fired from my job, which was the only source of income I had to pay for this. You know, people talk about back up against the wall, rock bottom. I was like, I need to get out from under this property. So I start calling cash companies and realtors, seeing what I could get for this house. I had taken a hard money loan from a couple different investors. I was paying like 10% interest on probably like 200 grand. I was getting fined $150 a day and I had no job, no money, let alone paying for normal life, right? Like paying for normal life wasn't even a thought at this point because of how big of this financial problem I was in. So I called a bunch of cash companies and everyone was like, hey, you know, they would tell me the price and I was probably 60 to 100 grand conservatively underwater. Meaning if I sold that, I'd be 60 to 100 grand short repaying the hard money, let alone the contractors. So I literally am, 23 at the time, no job. I contacted a bankruptcy attorney. I started looking at bankruptcy, Googling, reading. I was like, I have to declare bankruptcy. And a big part of that was it wasn't just a bank. I had taken money from friends. I'd taken money from someone who's an amazing dude from where I worked. And I was like, dude, what happens if I declare bankruptcy? I'm going to screw over these people that are like that loan me this money that are friends.
Can I just stop you? In that moment, like, what is the feeling? Just pure desperation? Like, because obviously there's an element in all of this where you succeed through it all, but I'm sure during that time, it wasn't this triumphant story. Like, did you think my life is over? Like all this was, I ruined it?
There was a lot of long showers.
Yeah.
Sitting there being like, what the fuck am I going to do? I was, debating the bankruptcy. And the only reason if it was a normal bank and I didn't feel like I was screwing over people who I was friends with, that would have been a route that I considered for longer. And so that was a really dark period. I have a beautiful girlfriend, hopefully fiance soon, and she stuck by me through that. And, I have an amazing family. And I was like, guys, I don't know what to do. And so what happened there was when I started looking at the numbers, I was like, even if I go get another job on Wall Street, which even that was going to be tough considering I wasn't going to get any referrals from where I just last.
For sure. You're not getting any character references from your former firm.
And so I was basically like, I have to figure out this wholesaling thing or declare bankruptcy. And so when you say backs up against the wall, like I literally had no way to afford my life. And I had this albatross of a deal that was half framed in a city I didn't live in with no contractor, getting fined $150 a day. And so that is when I went absolutely nuts with entrepreneurship and this business. And I probably worked every waking hour other than the time I was eating, which the time I was eating, I was watching YouTube or reading about the business and my 45-minute lift a day. I worked every waking hour for like a year straight, wholesaling, flipping contracts. That first year, that next 12 months, I did $400K in net profit to me. But here's the part of the story that people don't like to hear. I had zero social life. I missed family events. I missed every single friend event. I literally said to my girlfriend, like, hey, I hope you stay with me, but I have no choice but to do this. And so that was really when it started. And then I've just really continued to keep the foot on the gas since then. And, built, it's crazy to say, a multi-millionaire net worth by 27, making a ton of money, net income every single year, own 8 figures in real estate now. And that was really the catalyst of, I know that was a long-winded story.
Well, it's unbelievable, right? Because so many of these stories, and I've had some folks on the show, these amazing success stories that you just see like this little glimpse of, you don't understand the immense suffering that they were born out of. I mean, this was born out of the darkest. I hope that is the darkest period of your life.
Yeah.
I hope it is. And maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But it sounds like that year, you literally did nothing but study real estate wholesale and execute deals.
Yeah. I was calling every single call hour. I would call from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I would call all day, hundreds of calls a day.
On your cell phone?
Yep. And then I would call investors at night. And people are like, how would you call investors at night? Dude, I didn't give a fuck. I had to make money. Like I was about to go bankrupt. So I would work all weekend, call investors on the weekend, and I would just work at every single hour on the business. And that was really the start of it all. And now I've hired a team and really built a company around it. But yeah, it was an extremely dark period. And that was definitely the hardest time I've ever been through. But here's the thing, at every stage, when you just start playing in the millions of dollars, it's still scary, right? Because the problems are still massive now.
Yeah.
And what happens is you learn how to, fight the level 1 demon, but then you get to level 5, just like a video game, that motherfucker's way bigger.
Well, that's the thing is you've said, and you were quoted to me, which I think is a tremendous quote, as, look, the problems don't go away. The problems get bigger. I just become more equipped to deal with them. I think a misconception people have is...
I said that?
You said that.
That was good. That was good.
Yeah, that's good, dude. I think the misconception people have is once you become where you're at, you get no problems. You wake up every day. You play golf. The business runs itself. In fact, that seems not to be the case, but you've earned the right to be able to face these bigger demons.
Yeah, so I love human psychology and understanding why people think certain ways.
And I'd love to talk more about that because I think you have a very unique perspective and you're very well read.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Which I wouldn't expect because I remember growing up.
I look like an idiot. I look like I'm homeless.
No, you look like Tarzan. But because you weren't like the biggest reader, right? Like I never knew you to be a reader.
Yeah, no.
Now I go in your apartment, your whole thing is full of books. I'm like, and you're like, I've read all these.
Yeah. So I want to hit on a few things here. Reading, the way the school system teaches us to read, ruins it for most people. And I'll explain to you why. The school system says you have to read this book and you have to finish it. And you watch in adulthood, people will pick up a book, they'll start reading it and they'll lose interest.
Dude, I do that every week.
And that book then becomes an inhibitor to you picking up your next book because you have this weird societal construct in your brain where you think you have to finish that book. And that book will sit there and you won't read another book because you're waiting for you to have the energy to finish that book.
Well, yes. And also for me, I say, I'm clearly not a reader.
And so you see all those books in my apartment. This is the way I read. I read whatever my fleeting interest is, whether that's 5 minutes or 5 hours. I will read multiple books at a time. If I lose interest for a second, I put the book down. I will, while I'm still in the desire to read, I will literally pick up a new book. And here's the thing, guys. There is no one making sure you finish these books. No one gives a fuck. Yeah. There's no more tests. Like you don't have to finish these books, but what happens is you have this, it's a societal construct in your brain that says, I have to finish this book. No, you don't. Go read something else you're interested in. And so I get to consume so much knowledge because I don't play by the same rules as other people where they're like, did you finish the book? No, I don't get, why the fuck would I finish the book? I lost interest in it.
But net, you've read so much more.
Or I skip chapters. Or I'm like, hey, I already like, as you read more and more self-development books or real estate books, I might be like, I already know this whole chapter. Boom, boom, flip. Okay. Hey, let me look at whatever the thing tells you where all the chapters are. Right.
And find the interesting one.
Yeah. I'll be like, all right, this is what I need to know about this one book. I'll read that one thing and throw away the book.
I love
like,
that.
Who cares? But I think people in our society like create these weird things that block them from getting better at things. The other thing I do.
Wait, I don't want to move on from that because I think that's actually profound. What you're saying is that in our society, folks create these constructs that allow them to feel okay with being, I don't want to say mediocre, but not exceptional.
No, that is exactly what they do. You are nice. I am not. People create constructs to make themselves feel better. The minute you start excelling in life is when you realize everything is just your fault. Whether that be you could have actually prevented something or the way you respond to it. And so there is no difference with reading and obtaining knowledge and why someone can come from the exact same situation as you and one is a multimillionaire and one is not. And that is because you create these frameworks that then limit you, but you're doing it because you want to feel comfortable. Comfort and complacency is the number one factor of average people.
Look, I think you're exactly right. And I think this is what people do. And I'll say this because it's what I did. I used to have this idea of myself, right? I think over the years growing up, I created this idealistic vision of who I should be and who I won't be. And in that list was not being a podcaster. I would like work in finance and have this nice job and have a 9-to-5 and whatever. And I'm still doing that. But being a podcaster was not on that list. So when I would have these ambitions my whole life to start a podcast, I would say, well, I would love to have one, but I'm not a podcaster, so therefore I can't start. And all of a sudden now, in the last year, after just having started this, once you shatter a few of those preconceived notions, it all opens up. And again, right, you know, somebody listening might be like, that's corny, that's self-help, that's blah, 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 but it's really not. And once you start to break through one or two or three, it's limitless.
I think the reason that happens is a few things. People are worried about the impressions and views of people who don't even care about them in the
100%.
You are blocking yourself from becoming who you want to be because you're nervous about some other, hate to say it, average person's perspective. And you can attest to this. I have never met someone who makes more money than me, who condemns or criticize or does anything but uplift and encourage whatever idea I have.
And why do you think that is?
When people start making a lot of money, you realize there's an abundance mindset. Like I said in the beginning, you then remember that early period and you remember all these schmucks giving you a hard time. So you're going to be the G who's like, I got you, bro.
Yeah.
You're going to make it.
Yeah.
Here's some positivity for you. Here's where you need to go. Here's some free guidance, right? And people love to give back. People want to feel good. And so the other thing I'll say about this, I don't care what anyone's intentions are. I only care about someone's actions. People will criticize a billionaire for donating $50 million to charity. He's just doing it to make himself feel better. Good. He still donated $50 million. Like the action, regardless of intention, is good. And so I think if you connect that back to personal development, if you want to be someone else, stop worrying about how you feel about it and just take the actions of what it takes to be that. The gym is a perfect example of this. If you want to be someone who is fit, change your mindset from being like, I'm going to do it when I'm motivated. I'm just going to take this exact action every single day. Even when I'm upset, I can talk as negative as I want to myself. I can think I'm a bitch. I can think I'm fat, whatever. Keep that self-talk for this exercise, but just simply do the action. Once you do the action for a few weeks, like you said, break some of those barriers. All of a sudden you're like, oh, I kind of just do this. And then what will happen? Other people will start saying, oh, you're a gym guy. People before I started talking about entrepreneurship, before I started posting anything, people started sensing my change. I'm like, oh, are you like successful in business? I have incredibly negative self-talk. There's some people who are like, I sit in the shower every morning and tell myself I'm this and that. Not me.
Not me, brother. Not me.
And what I've learned is a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of really high earners, whether that be salespeople, whatever field, they have two traits in common. And here's the interesting thing. They conflict with each other. One, a desire, a higher power, some sort of feeling that they are meant for greatness or more. You can't shake it. You just feel it in your bones. And the second, which conflicts with this, is a massive...
Can I finish? And if I'm correct, please tell me, is a massive feeling of like inadequacy.
Yeah, a massive deep-rooted insecurity of massive insecurity of inadequacy. And what that does is it creates a cocktail. And so I'm learning this with content to just share more of my situation. And here's why I want to share it, because it gives you perspective of my motives. I just turned 28, 2 months ago. If I wanted to live a normal life, get a normal house, not drive supercars, live a very normal upper middle class life, I could retire today. And what happens when you get to this kind of like first level on that, and I'm a baby in the entrepreneurship space. Like I am a little boy, right? Relative to some of these, people I've met, hung out with. But the reason I'm going to keep playing is because I'm not doing it for the money. I have no desire for any more material stuff. Sure. Do I buy watches? Sure. Will I buy supercars? Sure. But that's not the game. I'm playing it because I have these feelings within me and I just want to see how far I can go. And so there's levels in the entrepreneurship game. Level one, you are fighting for your life. You are fighting to put food on the table. You're fighting to pay off debt. You're fighting to be able to survive. You then get to the second level, which is like you're making decent money. You're starting to put some money away. You then get to kind of where I'm at, right? You got a business that's running. You can show up or not. You got a bunch of assets. You have kind of like reached that first little level. At that level, you see who's playing the game to just be good at the game.
Right.
Like, here's the thing. What would I do all day? Like, imagine I stopped working. One, I know myself. I go 100% whatever I'm doing. That can be bad shit too.
Yeah.
Drinking, partying, shit I shouldn't be doing. Me and boredom, and a lot of people who are wired like us, do not mix well with boredom. You probably have your most negative thoughts. You probably you're most likely to go do shit that you shouldn't. So there's just a level where like, what else would I do? And so that's why I keep playing.
But some people, just to play the devil's advocate here, might say, oh man, I wish I was in Joe's shoes because I would finally get a chance to do nothing. That's all I want to do. And I think that's you're just not that way. No. You never want to do nothing.
I can never do nothing.
That's the thing.
My biggest inhibitor to future success is I get bored and try and start another business.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really terrible trait. It's the same trait that made me successful as an entrepreneur. And it's also like the number one Achilles heel that I have that can take me down is getting spread too thin.
One thing I want to hit on quickly before we move on to a few other things is we talked a bit about books and reading.
Yep.
One book you put me onto, I now believe, is the single most reason why people fail, not just entrepreneurs, but anybody in anything. And it's called The Dip. Can you talk about this concept? Like, I don't know if you're the only one talking about this or what, but like, I want you to become the face of The Dip. What is it?
2 best books ever written, The Dip and World's Greatest Salesman. If you read those 2 books on repeat, you don't have to become an entrepreneur. You will become lethal at whatever you do. The Dip is essentially a concept that can be applied to anything, from becoming a multimillionaire, building a successful podcast, being an incredible girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife,
Getting in the gym.
It can be applied to anything, but it can only be applied to things that society respects. And the reason I say it that way is the high level view of anything society respects is inherently hard. And that's why there's respect.
Yes, agree.
And so anything that is inherently hard to achieve follows the exact same pattern. And Hormozi talks about this. He calls it something other than the dip. I don't know if he's just a genius, so he probably came up with himself. But the way I figured it out was through this book, The Dip, which is essentially a continuous S-curve of how long it takes to become good at something. You may see a movie, you may see a TikTok, you may see an Instagram reel of someone in the gym, and you have this dopamine hit, and that's what people call motivation. You are motivated for a short period of time. And what happens is you go, I'm going to become a gym guy. I'm going to get a 6-pack. I'm going to get into really good shape. And you have what's called uninformed optimism. And I'm combining Hormozi here with The Dip because they're the exact same concept. He's the one who denotes it this way with the uninformed optimism. You then start learning more. Okay, so I have to adjust my diet. So I have to go to the gym like 5-6 days a week. Okay. And you get something called informed pessimism. And so as you're following the S, you come up on your motivation and then you learn how hard it is and you fall down into this pit. Most people quit at the dip. And what happens is if you ride out the dip, you then get what's called informed optimism. You start going to the gym. You start creating some habits. You start understanding, okay, like it was daunting at first, but I kind of have figured out a few things, kind of like you with this podcast, right? At first it was really daunting. Now you figure out the mics, right? Now you figure out the cameras, right? And you start getting where, okay, this is hard, but I'm starting to learn the first couple of skills required to have this compound. You then start rising above your previous level of optimism. And that's when you start experiencing your first level of like micro success in whatever you're doing.
Right. I completely agree.
Now, here's the key part of the concept. You experience these dips hundreds of times as you build anything notable, as you build an incredible physique, right? The first 10, 15 pounds are the easiest to lose. Then things get really hard again. You're like, oh shit, I have to like bust my ass for 6 weeks to put on 2 pounds of muscle. And it becomes incrementally harder. And so you experience these consistent dips. But the way that I've used this is you can apply this to any concept. And here's the big piece that I do. All you have to do is continue doing the same actions while you're in the dip and hold on. And that's where I've gone from making, 100K to 200K. Like that's where you really start to level up, is when you just hold on through the dip. Your next highest peak is always higher than your previous peak.
And honestly, too, I think a good mental frame for me that I like to use during these periods of time where, look, guys, here's an example of this podcast, right? You show up every week, you do an episode. We grew a lot in the fall and the winter. We passed 1,000 subscribers. By the way, thank you for everybody that subscribed. If you haven't, consider it. If you find this interesting, we post every week. But it's been slow lately. I'm in a dip right now as we speak. But I continue to tell myself the reason I will succeed is because everybody else will quit when they feel the way I feel right now. Now, that sounds like some noble thing, but the truth is it's really hard. You got to keep showing up, and it takes time every day. But hopefully, because I believe this will not all be for nothing, I'll look back and say, good thing I didn't quit.
What starts to happen, and I know you've already experienced this, and again, I've been trying to give you some of the lessons I've learned while we're building things vastly different. I've tried to instill some of the information I've learned, which one of those is that as you get through a dip, it's easier to sit through the next one because the concept becomes more ingrained with you.
And you're also prepared. You're like, man, this feels good, but I know what's coming.
So I'm at a point now, and I joke with you and I joke with people within my business. Give me the dip. Give me the problems. I need to sit through my next dip so I can take my income to the next level. And now I understand that, so much so that when I'm in a dip, man, that shit sucks. Do I sit in the shower? Do I, not sleep? Hell yeah.
Yep.
Every single time. But I welcome it now. And here's the thing. All you have to do is hold on. You just have to hold on through the dip. But here's the key. You can't adjust your daily actions. Like, again, I try and disassociate emotion from all of this shit. And a part of that is like, as I'm growing my business, there's some level where like the level of monetary problems I now deal with, if I let myself get worried about it, I'm fucked. I don't know if I can curse on this. Sorry.
You absolutely, and you have many times. So you're already past that.
I said that way too late.
But to your point, like, I think disassociating emotion from it is actually is table stakes for all of it, not just for monetary, but even like in the gym, right? You're not seeing results. You gotta just say it doesn't matter.
Like it's so cliche. You just simply have to build discipline instead of being motivated. And especially for anyone who's listening to this who has negative self-talk, I'm most times not motivated. And so if I just worked out or just built my business or just showed up when I was motivated, I wouldn't have anything.
Do you struggle with the negative self-talk?
Of course. Here's the demon that is self-doubt wants you to think you're the only person that feels that way. That same demon that talks, that self-talk wants you to think, oh, Joe's so successful, he never feels that way. Here's what I've learned. I've talked to dudes, 8, 9-figure entrepreneurs, like dudes worth $100+ million, and they have self-doubt. Everyone has it. That demon wants you to be by yourself, right? It wants you to think, oh, I don't really want to mention this to Joe because he probably doesn't feel that way. And having gotten around other highly, highly successful people, and something I've made a concerted effort in the last like year and a half is getting around some really incredible other entrepreneurs. And I've realized, holy shit, no one knows what they're doing. I mean, the dude worth 100 million. I mean, he knows what he's doing, but he doesn't know what he's doing to get to $1 billion.
And
right?
even still though, I just think the element of community and being amongst like-minded people, I think is super important, especially when you're striving for more. Yes, it's nice to have friends, but it's also nice to have friends that can empathize with you. This is a unique feeling.
So I talked about this on the No Victim pod that I was on last week, and it's a really thing that I'm fairly passionate about. I think all the content saying you have to get rid of every single person in your life and like just be friends with people who are ahead of you, right? You see all that kind of content, right?
Of course.
That is all bullshit. You need to audit your circle. Someone does not have to be a multimillionaire to be my friend, but they have to respect and push me forward. If they are not that, they cannot be anywhere near me. And so there are friends and family members who you and everyone listening likely needs to remove from their life. There are also friends and family members who will never make a lot of money, but will be amazing people on your way.
And will honestly help you so much.
So much. And so what you do is you simply expand your circle as you're auditing. Find people who you want to be like and spend some time with them. Find people who align with you. Find people who are passionate about anything. And then here's the thing. The people who are good in your life, bring them in. Like the people who you value, bring them into your business. Bring them into your circles and give them all the knowledge you're learning and share it. Because here's the thing. You don't just have to be ahead of someone. Financially, am I ahead of you? Yes. I learn shit from you all the time. I ask so many questions about the podcast. I love it because I understand that everyone can teach me something. Like I have friends in my circle who I ask advice from all the time who don't have businesses, but I'm not like, maybe I'm not asking them business advice, but maybe they're really good at something. And so here's a really simple audit. If you're asking someone for advice, would you trade places with them in their domain of what you're asking them for? If I'm asking someone relationship advice who's notoriously single, probably not the best person to ask advice from. If you ask your parents for financial advice and they're not multi-millionaires, probably not who you want to listen to. But people do this. They'll listen to Uncle Larry of why they shouldn't buy real estate because he got screwed on one deal when he was 30. That dude doesn't know what he's talking about. Your parents don't know how to build a business. Don't take entrepreneurial advice from them. The same way I might, if someone's worth $100 million and has been through 5 divorces, probably don't take relationship advice from them. You know, like you have to audit the domain that people are giving you advice from.
I think it's actually very easy when you think of it. Like you can very quickly know, like, okay, these people are really good people and people that I should keep around. I can probably name to you 7 people that I genuinely believe are like in my corner and want me to succeed. That doesn't mean that the others want me to fail, but I could probably name on.
No, that a lot of them do.
Maybe a lot of them do.
Mm-hmm. And want to know why? It's not because they actually want you to fail. It's because then they won't feel as bad about themselves. And I know that's a hard truth, but it is the truth. And it's why you have to cut bad people out of your life. I've been fortunate where I actually, one, probably because I literally don't spend any time with people I don't like. Like so much so if I don't like someone, I would literally just never speak to you. I just have zero desire for that. If I love you, I'm going to be the best friend I ever can to you.
Yeah.
But if I have no desire to be your friend, you will just never hear from me.
Yeah.
And so I've been lucky with my early content stuff where I've experienced very little hate. Am I certain people talk about me behind my back and say my shit's cringe? 100%. Have
100%.
people who were my friends at one time in life unfollowed me? Yes. Good. You think I care? Like, I'm out here. I got way bigger problems over here. Like if you think I, for 1 second, am worried about what any person thinks of me.
Also, dude, more than caring what they think, it's just you. Like, if that's me and you don't like it, that's a big theme of this show. I am who I am, and if you don't like it, I don't hate you for it, but I don't want you around. I have leaned on something in the last year. I want to bring this up because I think it's interesting. You talked about how, when you take these leaps of faith, people come back into your life, and they're there for a reason. And I don't know why all this started, and maybe it coincides with me starting the podcast, but I was not a very faithful person growing up, and I have become one in the last year. And of course, I'm a self-aware person, so I ask myself, am I just faithful now because it's convenient, because I have this hard thing? I don't know, and I don't think that's relevant. What I will say is that I've become quite faithful. And during those moments where I talk negatively to myself, and I feel like nobody has my back, even though people do, I do feel like God has my back, or whatever you want to call that, whatever language feels comfortable to you. You are a faithful person, and you have been. And you got tattoos, Bible verses on your arm. And like, how has your faith helped you in your business journey?
I've had an interesting relationship with God and my faith.
Well, I want to hear about it.
Yeah, I'll tell you that full story, but I want to connect something back to what you just said. If even just one person listens to this podcast and hears what I'm saying, don't put the pressure like you're doing on yourself to worry about your intentions of why you got back in with God. It's okay if your intentions were selfish. The reason I got back in with God is highly selfish. I needed help. And so what happens is, and this is something I disagree heavily with the Catholic Church, which, I was raised very Roman Catholic. Religion wants you to think that you have to have good intentions. And the church does this, but the Bible does not say that. God designed us to sin. He put this concept of confliction in us. It's what makes us human. And it's what makes us need God. If we didn't have a confliction within us, we wouldn't need God. Your intentions can be selfish coming back in. Don't even worry about it. Who cares? And a lot of churches get this wrong, where they tell people, oh, you have to just be inherently a good person. If your actions are good, even if they have selfish intent, if you only do good actions, you are still good. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. And my fear is kind of exactly what you're speaking to, which is, man, I hope that God doesn't think less of me, because God knows that I'm only so faithful because I want him to help me.
Yeah.
Because look, part of it is that. And another part of it is that I'm so grateful and eternally humble to have the life that I have. But I'd be lying if I said that part of it wasn't the fact that this is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
And I want to take some of the burden and lay it on him.
The displacement of burden is a massive reason why I got back in with God. As you start tackling bigger and bigger problems, it becomes much harder for you as a singular person to deal with.
And my problems are like this. To me, they feel like this. Either way, I got to lay it on.
So here's something I want to say. Your biggest problem and my biggest problem, even if monetarily wise are massively different, have the same exact negative feeling towards us. Your biggest problem is just that, your biggest problem. And so anyone listening, and I'm even talking to you here with this, don't downplay your problems. Don't even have negative self-talk. Your biggest problems are still massive problems, and you're doing a fantastic job of dealing with them. And I say that because people will, they discredit themselves all the time. Just deal with what's on your plate. So connecting this back with what we were talking about with God, I am a huge believer that intention, as I said, is irrelevant. If you get back in with God, and in turn your actions start making you a better person, you have done exactly what God designed you to do.
That's true. That's very true.
Struggle and come back to God. Ask God for help. God then provides you help, and you then have better actions because of it. And so my journey with religion, my grandmother, amazing human being. I'm extraordinarily close with her, love her to death. We were raised very Roman Catholic. Like, she is very, very religious. And so grew up being very in touch with God, praying every single night, even by myself. Like I never could connect with church well, but I, from a very young age, have always prayed. And my praying took different shapes and forms. Looking back on, again, obviously I didn't know what was going on then, but I always talked with God. In college, had, as a lot of people do, had like a traumatic event happen where lost someone super close to my family, super close, like a father figure of mine, out of the blue. Horrible, horrible experience. And I kind of like at that moment said, God, like, when something like that happens and you're a little kid and you're growing up, and now I'm like a young adult, right? I'm probably like 18 or 19 at this point. and I see this massive traumatic event happen with an unexpected death of someone it wasn't their time. Your faith is tested.
It's
right?
shaken.
It's shaken. And so I was like, fuck this. And I went on this huge atheist spell, and I became obsessed with trying to understand evolution. I love evolution, and I love human psychology. And so I started reading theory of the universe. I started reading all about the cosmos. I watched everything I could on it. And as I got smarter, I understood the scientific explanation of all this shit less and less. You're telling me two hydrogen atoms collided and made all of this? Shut up. Like, come on. We've been spinning these hydrogen atoms in this thing, and I don't know where it is, but we've been spinning them for like a decade, and we can't create anything close to this. So as I got smarter, there was actually a scientific reason why I started being like, okay, I know I'm mad at God the last couple of years, but some of this ain't adding up.
Yeah.
And so I started kind of like probably right when I graduated college. So I went through probably like a 2-3 year atheist spell where I was like really not believing in God. Here's the interesting thing. I got really into meditation then, which was essentially me just praying. I just was like, I'm not talking to you, God. Like,
yeah. You're like, I'm talking to somebody, but it's not you.
Yeah. And I used to say, oh, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people say that.
100%. And I always say, if you're talking to anyone, whatever religion you believe, you're talking to something.
Right.
And so I got really into that kind of as I got into entrepreneurship here. I was not enjoying my time working that job, and I'm not afraid to admit this, and I'll even say this at my church. As I started making a lot of money, that first phase when I really started asking God for help is when I was in debt, back up against the wall, facing bankruptcy. When you're sitting there in the shower being like, I'm about to declare bankruptcy at 23 years old, you're talking to someone.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of where I started getting back into reading the Bible. And so as a child, like a teenager, I'd actually read the Bible fully through. And I had a couple of events that happened to me as I was going through all of this that were so incredibly profound that like I literally have a tattoo of one of the events. So this tattoo, as I'm kind of getting in touch with God, going through a really hard time period, my grandfather, who was, the husband of my grandmother, who was like highly religious, and he was very religious too, but I felt more of a religious connection with my grandmother. She like taught us more, it felt like. He passed away. When I was 12 or 13, my grandmother had given us all engraved Bibles, beautiful Bibles with our names on it. And I had read the entire thing over 2 years. And I had underlined everything I loved within the Bible. And after I'd underlined it, I flipped back through and I read all of the underlined things. And I picked one single verse and I wrote it in the front of the Bible at like 13 years old. My grandfather passes away. At his burial, they played the song that my grandmother had picked, which was the verse I had written in the front of the Bible a decade before. And at that moment, I remember being upset and just being like, holy shit. And that is when I really went so hard back in to my religion and faith. And here's the other thing that I'll say with this. As I've started making more money, a lot of people who are like go people really, do things really hard. We also go very bad the other way. You get into shit you're not supposed to do, fighting, partying, like, women, whatever that may be. I have a proclivity to go really hard in whatever I'm doing. And what I've noticed is a lot of people who if you think it's hard to not do bad things, party, women, drugs, all that kind of stuff, when you have no money, imagine being young and then having a boatload of money with it. And I watched a lot of these entrepreneurs, a lot of them on YouTube, like Patrick Bet-David is a huge idol of mine, incredibly religious, has a perfectly intact family, has incredible morals, doesn't mess around with any of that other stuff. And so as you start making more money, there are two roads. There's you either get back in with faith and believe God is putting you here and you have a responsibility to act a certain way, or you go full hedonism, self-serving pleasure, right? Which is where the drugs, all the part, and it gets really dangerous as you start making more and more money. So I have been totally, and I'm okay admitting it, selfish, saying, God, I have a proclivity for not doing good stuff. How do I stay on this track? And so that has been incredibly helpful for me. In addition, like you said, I'm displaced when I'm highly stressed and I'm like, holy shit, what am I going to do with this? I always come back to God is building me into the person who can be an 8-9 figure kind of dude. And that simple frame helps me immensely just sit through the fire because I'm displacing it. God, you're fucking me up right now, but I'm in it. I'm in it and I'm going to sit through it and I'm going to show up every single day. And I'm going to, when I go through hard times, maybe I go to church the way and everyone does things differently. When I go to church, I don't listen. I pray the entire time I'm in church. I'm in my own world. I'm in my own head. And I go to church sometimes multiple days a week. There's a 7 a.m. mass, 20 minutes. Wonderful. You bet your ass when I'm going through it, when I'm in a massive dip. And here's the thing about the dip. As you're reaching the bigger peak, each dip, what used to be a $10,000 problem becomes a $100,000 problem. What now becomes $100,000 problems are now $1 million problems for me. And so the dips get harder. And so when I'm in those periods, I'm 100% going to church more often. I'm reading the Bible every single morning because I'm asking for help. And people are so afraid to admit that.
And you don't think that makes me a bad Christian?
No. And people are going to hate that I'm about to say this. I think what makes you a bad Christian is the people who tell you, who condemn you for feeling that way. And I don't think they're actually understanding the Bible. And that I don't like. And that feeling you're feeling is not perpetrated in the Bible. Like if you read the Bible, God talks about how messed up we are. Like he constantly talks about how many flaws we have, how we have the inclination to sin. Like here's the thing. And I think of it this way. God tells me it's a sin to, be with more than one woman, right? And I love my partner to death, who will eventually be my wife. Then why did he genetically design us to feel differently? But that confliction is okay. And it helps to acknowledge it and then be like, God, I need help dealing with this, right? God, why do I want to make, boatloads of money? God, why do I feel this way? Instead of saying, oh, I'm worried to even speak this, just talk with him about it.
Yeah.
I know we're going super deep on this, right?
But I think that's part of it that I need to get past. And, we have a mutual friend, his name is Manny, who's really helped me to understand. And he would agree exactly with what you're saying. But I think there is some guilt that can sometimes be associated with this stuff. And this part of the guilt that I feel is that, I'm not a righteous Christian. I come to God as somebody who's only asking and wanting to take.
So here's what I'll say to that. You come to God asking, but the only way God will help you is if you then adjust your behavior based on what God wants. And so who cares if you're asking for help? As long as you create more good, that's all that matters.
And look, and candidly, this is my prayer. And I've said this on prior episodes. My prayer is simply this: God, put me where I need to be. That's all I ask. I will do the work, but I want you to put me where I am, and wherever my feet are, I will go 100%. That's all I ask. But I think in my heart, sometimes I still feel unworthy of the request.
Love that. May I suggest,
please,
shifting the way you say that to God? And here's the thing, the outcome is still the same. God, put me through the situations I have to be who I need to be.
Yeah.
Because then it encompasses all the bad too. Sometimes I think people think that you talk to God and all of a sudden everything's just going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if you shift to realize, okay, God needs me to go through this problem. So like, for example, a lot of my self-talk and self-doubt is, why am I not worth 10, 50, $100 million yet? The denomination is irrelevant. I'm sure when I'm worth $25
it'll
million,
always be something more.
People would look at me from the outside and be like, oh, he's really successful. Every day I'm like, why am I not triple the size?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I used to talk with God and say, please let me grow. Please let me be bigger. Please help me with this. And now I sit there and say, God, what do I need to go through to be the man who could be an 8 or 9 figure entrepreneur, right? What do I need to go through to be the man who could be an amazing partner to Shoshana? And the answer is not easy times. If you fast forward and you look at yourself 40 years old and you've got this massive podcast and you have these incredible guests and you have this massive following, is that person someone who did it really quickly and had no hard roads? Or did you have an incredible amount of things to overcome? Did you have incredibly hard times? And did you have to persevere an immense amount? And the answer is almost always that the road has to be hard to achieve anything that society views as impressive.
And honestly, the only certainty that I can give, or hope for certainty in that case, is that I just continue to put one foot in front of the other. That's the thing. It can only become that way if you don't quit.
Yeah, you can only keep showing up. The only way you lose in any game is to quit.
Yeah.
And so I think people like, this is something, and I've talked with you about this. Oftentimes people's reason for quitting is not a lack of knowledge. It's an incorrect expectations of how hard something actually is. I see this in business all the time. And I'm in a space where it's a fairly guru-y space, right? Like there's very low barrier to entries. And so there's thousands of wholesalers. There's like a very small select few who make all of the money.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I see is someone will get into business or get into podcast and they'll be like, dude, I've been doing this for 6 months and I'm not making 50,000 net a month. It is supposed to take a decade.
Yeah.
It's supposed to take a very long time. And the reason you get such abundant rewards is because of how hard and how long it takes. And so the fact that it is hard and takes long is why you're after it. Podcasting is a wonderful example. Podcasting is incredibly hard to make money from, but when you do, you make a lot of money from it.
Exactly. I mentioned the Pareto principle in the beginning, but it's really the same thing.
What is that principle?
80% of the results or of the outcomes of something come from 20% of the people doing it. So like
Interesting.
80% of viewers are watching 20% of the podcasts, right? And
I bet it's even crazier.
Oh, it's more
distorted.
It's probably 95% of viewers are watching 3% of the podcasts.
Yes.
And so there's such a low barrier to entry to get in because you can just go buy a mic and YouTube is free, but it's very, very, very hard to be one of those top 5%.
So here's a general concept that your viewers may get some value out of. There is an inverse correlation between the barrier to entry and how easy it is, but where it balances is competition. Realtors are a wonderful example of this. There are more realtors than houses will ever, I think there's a statistic that there's like more realtors than houses or something in the United States right now.
Okay.
Here's the thing. 99% of realtors are awful and make no money. 1% make millions and millions of dollars. But the reason for that is super low barrier to entry, incredibly high competition.
It's the exact same thing as podcasting.
Yeah.
But if you can break into that upper echelon, there is so much, right?
And what happens with business is you receive outsized returns for solving outsized problems. The problem with highly competitive spaces is most suck. So be good. And you make a lot of money. I know that's like a super dumbed down reason, but realtors are a wonderful example of this. Most realtors are highly incompetent. I'll put my name on that. I hope realtors see this. Most are awful. When you find a good realtor, they're amazing, right? Because you've gone through so much of the shit where you now are like, wow, I value the good so much more now.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, not to keep talking about podcasting, it is the same thing. Do you know how many freaking podcasts I follow on Instagram just to see how long they last? Just to see how I can outlast them. Some last 4 episodes, some last 10, some last 20. I have yet to see one that I follow that is still going to this day.
They quit.
Other than the big ones.
They quit during the dip.
Yeah.
And so what makes you good is being able to ride out the dip. And if you distilled success down to one single thing, it's simply holding on during the hard times.
That's it.
That's all it is. That's all it is. And here's the thing. At every level, you go through really hard times. And you just have to hold on. Just get to that next peak.
And maybe we can like sort of put a fine point on this point by saying this. Tell me if you disagree. That's the adventure we're all, at least I'm searching for, is I want to ride that shit out, man. That is way more exciting to me than some stable, fun, cozy existence. I want to go hard as fuck, experience down times, high times. To me, that's more exciting.
The dips, the hard part, are the story.
Exactly.
You haven't even asked me about making all the money. I told the story of being in debt.
Yeah.
Right? No one cares that I make all of this money now.
Right.
Like no one cares about that. The reason all of these books about highly successful people have such long periods of them explaining the hard parts, the reason why like things I've posted that do well, me talking about having dyslexia, all that kind of stuff do well, is because that is the story.
And also, I also think like that's us. Like we are people, not us, but human beings. We struggle, we persevere, we overcome. That's the part that's exciting.
I also think the reason people like consuming that content and like reading about it and hearing about it is they realize that everyone has hard times. No one is special. Sure, there are some people who are just insanely smart out here.
Of course.
But like most people are super average in terms of the hands they're dealt in life. And people will use excuses and they'll create narratives when they don't hear the actual story.
Right.
Oh, he had it easy. Oh, he's better than me at this. Oh, this was that or whatnot. But those are simply narratives to make themselves feel better. And when they hear a story of perseverance, hear a story of, whoa, that was really ugly there for a second, right? They're like, oh, I'm kind of there.
Right.
That could be me.
And I feel like it can do two things. It can inspire you, which I hope it does. Or you can say to yourself, well, he did it. And clearly he was where I'm at, but I can't because X, Y, and Z. And that victim mindset, that's dangerous.
Man, don't get me started about.
Yeah, we don't even need to go there, but we
can
know.
Go there if you want. Here's the thing, you either have your challenges be the reason why you didn't succeed, or they're a part of your killer comeback story. Right. And so that is a frame of mind. There are a lot of people who are victims, and they will never, ever succeed in relationships, in business, in life. And I'm not afraid to I'm not afraid to say that. I know like people would be like, that's offensive to some. I don't care. And here's the thing. Isn't just for entrepreneurs. If you work a job, be killer at it. Don't be a victim. Don't be like, oh, that. Shut up. Like, and here's the thing. When you flip that mindset, even if you don't want to be an entrepreneur and you want to, still build an amazing life, if you flip that from being a victim and you start crushing it at your job, you can make a ton of money. You can build a beautiful life. You can still have incredible social events. Here's the big thing. I don't believe everyone should be an entrepreneur. Not in the slightest. If people knew the trade-offs you had to make, most would not choose to do so. But people will just not try anything. And that's what I got a problem with. And those are the people who are victims. And they believe, I was born into this circumstance. I was born this way. I had this bad hand dealt. Here's the thing. And I think Hormozi said this and I love it. Regardless of your situation, no matter how bad it is, there is someone who had your situation worse who does it 10 times better than you.
And that should motivate you.
Totally. Because your situation is just part of the story. And here's the good part. And I can speak from experience with this. Kids and people who inherit money, why are they all so not exciting? Why are they all, a lot of them, messed up?
Yeah.
Why are a lot of them struggle to do basic things in life? Why do a lot of them struggle with relationships? Why do a lot of them struggle with purpose? It's only fun making a lot of money when you didn't have any. And this sounds silly, but it's important to me. I eat whatever I want, whenever I want. I eat a beautiful grass-fed steak 2 times a day. I go to any beautiful restaurant whenever I want and never look at a price. And the reason I love that is I remember in college when me being able to get Chipotle once a week was like, I'm rolling in it. I can get Chipotle on a Friday night. I'm balling. And the reason why now I appreciate that so much is because I have that comparison. If you never have that comparison, it's not fun. And so I'm connecting this back. If you have a horrible situation, good. You will then be so much more proud and your story is so much more epic. Here's the thing. You just want a good story. You want your grandkids to be like, my grandfather was a beast.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or grandmother, think about what they're going to say about you. Oh, he just never tried.
There is an arc to our lives. There is a story. And the only person that writes the story is you. And again, I don't want to be speaking in cliches, but as I get older and you realize like when you're young and then you're a teenager, like you feel like there are people helping you. And then you kind of become an adult and you realize like, shit, I'm holding the pen. And I can either just like keep the pen up off the paper or I can start writing.
100%. And I keep coming back to this because I've been putting out a lot of entrepreneurial content, but I want to be clear about this. That doesn't mean you have to go make $1 million.
And I love that, by the way, I love that you say that because, in my experience, this is not just Joe on a podcast. Like, you're not saying everybody needs to go do what I'm doing. You're like, if your goal is to be the best friend you can be,
totally,
that's awesome.
If you're going to decide, hey, I just want to work 40 hours a week, cool. Crush those 40 hours, but then make a cognitive effort to be, I'm going to be the most socially fulfilled person ever.
Right.
I'm never going to miss an event. I'm going to be the best friend I can. I'm going to be an amazing father or mother. I'm going to be an amazing son or daughter, right? Like I'm going to show up for everything. And so my guidance there is set proper expectations and stop creating anxieties for yourself. If you decide that, then don't put the pressure on yourself to want $1 million.
Right.
Don't want the Lambo. Don't want the watches. Don't want all of that and be like, you know what? I'm going to crush my job when I'm there and I'm going to be the most socially fulfilled person I can ever be. And every single person I spend time with loves me to death because I'm there for them and I'm a good human being to them.
So it's all about setting the frame.
The correct expectations are what create your own happiness.
Yeah.
And when you set incorrect expectations, and this comes down to entitlement, and I've posted a lot about this. Entitlement is the most dangerous thing to ever exist in someone's brain. Entitlement is simply believing you deserve something you have not yet earned. And so here's the thing. Like when people say, I'm entitled to this, I hate this. And I saw this post and made me so angry. They're like, I sit in front of the mirror and say that I deserve this. I deserve $1 million. I deserve this beautiful girlfriend. If you deserved it, you would have it. If I deserve to be worth 25 million, I would be worth 25 million. And so what people get wrong is they believe that they're entitled to something. They believe they're entitled to a government handout. They believe they're entitled to this. You have exactly what you deserve and what you have earned. And so connecting this back, you need to just simply set the expectation. If you don't want to work harder, then don't say you deserve anything. In turn, stop stressing out about it.
Right.
Like just be happy with what you have. And people, like happiness is truly a choice. You can put me in the middle of a massive lawsuit, which I've gone through, and I will be laughing and smiling. Because here's the thing. You can either have a lot of problems and be in a bad mood, or you can have a lot of problems and be in a good mood. You can sit and be a bitch all day. Or you can just be in a good mood and still have a good time. I go through so much shit with my businesses, and I still laugh and smile and have fun and wake up and all right,
here we go.
Let's see if I get kicked in the nuts today.
Right.
Let's see how bad it's going to hurt.
So look, man, to close this out, I'm really curious to your answer to this. I think about my legacy a lot. It's probably too much, and I think at times it's daunting, but I'm curious if somebody asked you, hey, Joe, when you're gone someday, and you will be, how do you want people to look back on you? What do you want your legacy to be?
I have not thought much
Good.
about legacy.
Don't.
I have realized I like simply feeling that I have grown. When people say you've changed, it is the best thing I've ever heard. When I feel that evolution within inside of myself, that is what I'm realizing I'm after. And so if I had to think of what I would want someone to be, I'd be like, Joe never stopped learning and growing. And in turn, he became just a beast, right? And he's a beast because he simply wanted to continue improving, right? And it's that chase of just being better, we are all born with natural proclivities, right? There are certain things kids look up to, right? Everyone wants to be an athlete. Everyone wants to do this. If you're not going to go that route, why not then try and be the best version of whatever you're doing?
And that could be anything. And what I'll harken back to is what you said many times. People might get tripped up and be like, well, Joe's an entrepreneur, so he probably wants me to be one too. That's not at all. Joe just wants you to be the best at whatever you're trying to be.
Totally. And that can be something as simple. And here's the thing, simple and easy are two vastly different things, but they're all often confused. It's something as simple as being a good friend is actually hard to do.
Agree.
And so people be like, that's so, cliche to say that you should be a good friend. If you're not going to be a good friend, why have that person in your life?
Yeah.
And that's my big thing that I'm trying to put out on my content. If you're going to spend a second doing anything, why not try and be really good at it?
Yeah. And I think you embody that. You really do. You go 110% in everything you do, and I really respect you for it.
Thank you.
Well, it's been an honor having you on. I do deeply appreciate you, and I expect that there will be a round 2 and hopefully a 3 and a 4 and a 5 as you continue to grow in your business and on this content journey.
Shit. Hopefully we keep leveling up out here and we can do one of these every year. And I got a lot new perspective to share with people, and I've grown, and the businesses are bigger and the real estate portfolio is bigger, and
the Joe is different.
The Joe has evolved, who knows what the next evolution of Joe is, but hopefully it's more jacked and more healthy relationships. That's all. Is that not what we're all after, right? Be in the best shape we can be, do as best we can in life, and have really healthy relationships along the way.
That's it, man. That doesn't sound like a bad formula. Well, thanks again, brother.
I think I'm a jerk out here. I'm yelling at people on your pod. But,
just trying to do the best you can.
Just trying to do the best you can, And I don't have room for victim mentality, any of that BS,
Couldn't agree more. Well, thanks again, brother.